Stephen continues his discussion of the maturity continuum by explaining why habits 1, 2, and 3 are basically character habits that enable us to move from dependency to independency.
I've got to tell you a study I made for a bicentennial study. I made it in 1976 and studied the success literature in this country over a 200-year period from 1776. I became fascinated. It got me literally into hundreds, even thousands of books. And I could clearly see a fundamental shift taking place in this success literature. I'm talking about the success literature that's popular in the magazines and the books. For the first 150 years in this country, almost the entire thrust and theme of the success literature was character. Character. Characteristics of the person. Basic habits such as industry, integrity, modesty, thoughtfulness, love, service, and so forth. Character, see? The last 50 years, the focus shifted to one that we might call the personality ethic, to differentiate it from the character ethic. It's heavily imbued by technique, technologies, how to lubricate the processes of human interaction, influence people, mental technologies, PMA, positive mental attitude, and other ways of organizing our life, our responses, so as to be effective with other people, without perhaps fundamentally dealing with our own character. These basic habits, these 7 basic habits, help us to move from dependency through independency up into interdependency. And the first 3 habits are basically character habits. Character habits. The next 3 habits are what you might call personality habits, the outward expression of this independent character. I'm not against the concept of the personality ethic. I'm in favor of it, as long as it is a natural, congruent outgrowth of character. But if, like an iceberg, the tip of it, being personality, is separated from, truncated from, the great mass of the iceberg underneath the water, what happens is people begin to develop a life pattern of habits that are manipulative and often deceptive. They work with hidden agendas, and they're heavy into techniques and quick fix ideas, ways of getting what they want now. And sometimes they're able to, and they can move from one field of endeavor to another. However, study any long-term relationship with those manipulators, those people that are taking withdrawals from the emotional bank account. Study any long-term relationship, and the natural principles being violated will expose the flaw in that personality approach. It'll expose it. They'll be found out, and then they often will pretend it and fake it for the public, but their private lives are often in shambles. And they know it, and their marriages and their family lives. It's a joke. They're not really independent. They're not interdependent. They're dependent. Or sometimes it's a counterfeit independency called counterdependency. They're in a state of rebellion. They're still being controlled by the thing that they need, only in a negative way. Like teenage kids sometimes may rebel against their parents, and the parents looking at their behavior may think, I have no influence with these kids. In fact, the parents are controlling those kids only in a negative way. They do the very opposite of what the parents want. It's called a counterdependency. It isn't true independency. To develop an independent character is a major achievement. Interdependence is the choice which independent people can make. Dependent people cannot choose to become interdependent. They don't have enough character strength inside themselves. They don't own themselves enough. They don't know who they are enough. They don't have a deep enough sense of self. They don't know what they stand for. They become almost like chameleons, that little animal that blends into whatever environment it's in. And the principle that runs their life is expediency, not integrity. And eventually, in long-term relationships, you'll see overdrawn emotional bank accounts. It's inevitable, particularly in times of stress, fatigue, times of storm. The shallowness of the root structure will be revealed. So I was very, very intrigued by that bicentennial study, and persuaded me to try to focus on the study of those habits that are fundamentally character habits. Habits 1, 2, and 3. And habits 4, 5, and 6 are the natural fruits of those character roots. They also become habits. They are the personality expressions of that character. They're congruent with it. All of us know from our experiences in school that you need to take some classes before you can take other classes. You need to study math before you can possibly understand algebra, and algebra before you can deal with calculus. We know that in farming we need to plant before we can harvest, with all of the intervening processes between. We know with our children that they learn to walk before they run, and they crawl before they walk. In nature, all things work in a sequence. And to me, one of the fundamental flaws with simplistic success formulas and human relations technologies is they do not respect that natural principle. It is futile to try to improve relationships without trying to improve ourselves. It is worthless and futile to try to develop new communication strategies and human relations techniques if fundamentally we're duplicitous and deceitful and lazy. Flaky people will be found out under stress and pressure, even though on the surface they might put on a very charming exterior. So I put a heavy emphasis on the sequencing of these habits. And by the way, these habits are the best research habits you'll find in all literature. And I'll tell you the best source for you to validate that. Examine your own lives. These habits are so self-evident that once you understand them, they're not arguable. You'll find as we go through these 7 habits, they're the very essence of the natural laws of life. All right, then, let's remember, habits 1, 2, and 3 are habits of character that enable us to move from dependency to independency, a major achievement. Habits 4, 5, and 6 are habits of the outward expression of character in the relationship with other people. We could call that personality if you wish. That's the fruit. The fundamental habits are the roots.